Hey guys, and welcome to the next installment. This is actually the last installment in our Period 3 lecture video series, and we're going to go through a couple different things, and we are picking right where we left off with the Constitutional Convention taking place and the Constitution being ratified, and now we have some presidencies. And we're going to take a look at the first two presidencies, that of George Washington and John Adams. As we go through here, we're really going to talk about kind of shaping a new republic, and as far as setting precedents for President Washington. And then, the ideas of, do our ideas, our ideology shape our policies or vice versa, when we talk about some of the works of John Adams and what he does during his time as president, his one term as well. So let's go ahead and dive right on in and kind of see where we left off with. Remember, we saw the Constitution being ratified, and George Washington is actually going to be the first ever and the only unanimous elected president. So every single electoral vote went towards him. Now, really, he was seen as the perfect choice because he was a man who had dignity and honor, who knew the likes of the country from going to war, and was well respected by both parties. And really, his goal, or what we kind of remember him for, is his ability to shape the nation and create certain precedents for everybody else to follow in his footsteps. So during Washington's first term, he is going to primarily focus on the issues domestically and things that are happening within the country that are failing or that need addressed. And the very first thing really we're going to take a look at is the Judiciary Act. And why that's important is that it's still the way the court systems are set up today. And in the Constitution, you have in the third clause, you have the Supreme Court being set up, but not a whole lot talking about the smaller level courts and the other federal courts. So he is going to set up a system of courts here with the Judiciary Act as far as how they will operate and the kind of the structure of them. As you can see here, the Supreme Court being the top, and we have Court of Appeals. There will be 12 regions around there. You have district courts, and then you also have military courts down here below. And each of these cover different things, but again, it all goes back up towards the Supreme Court. He's also, one of his presidents, he's going to set up a cabinet. And with his first cabinet here, he's going to set up a Congress with Treasury, people who are in charge of the Treasury, the state, Treasury of War, and the different departments. And you can see here himself as Secretary of War, his Secretary of Treasury, and Attorney General Edmund Randolph, and it really puts together a tight-knit group of well-respected minds for the time period. And they are supposed to be the experts, and they help advise the president in their respective fields. And this is the case even today. Every president has their own cabinet members that help to advise them and work with them in the executive branch. Alexander Hamilton, the first here, we're going to take a look at the Secretary of the Treasury. The Treasury Department is basically involved with money and the economy. And what we're going to see is that Alexander Hamilton has a vision for how the American economy should operate and what it should be based around. Not everybody agrees with this, especially Thomas Jefferson. And Thomas Jefferson is his Secretary of State, who's basically trying to help kind of influence our impact on the world, dealing with foreign nations, and basically trying to make sure there's no war, or what treaties we can solve, or trade negotiations with certain countries. So you have two conflicting ideas here on the role of government and what the government's path should be moving forward. And when we get to class, we'll do a little bit more in depth with what each man believed the role of government should be in each respective idea. But I do like this chart. I just want to share this chart with you a little bit as far as some of the major things. Hamilton is all about federalism. He believes that there should be a stronger central government over state governments. Jefferson's the opposite. He sees state and local governments with a limited central government. Hamilton is more about a republic, where you have people in power, or I should say, not so much the will of the people because of fear of mob rule, so getting away from a democracy where it's just voting on every issue. Jefferson's more about fear of a tyrant and trying to stay away from monarchy as much as possible. There's also the idea of strict versus loose interpretation of the Constitution. Hamilton believes in a loose interpretation, and what we mean by that is, as long as the Constitution does not say you can't do it, then it must mean that you can do it. And the opposite of that would be a strict interpretation of the Constitution here with Jefferson, where you can only do what the Constitution explicitly tells you to do. And one of the biggest ideas is going to come on the national bank. Alexander Hamilton believes there should be a national bank to help regulate currency, to help regulate trade between states and also other nations. Jefferson does not believe that he actually believes the national bank would hurt the economy and would not benefit the United States. Hamilton believes that under loose interpretation, there is nowhere in the Constitution that says you can't create a national bank. Therefore, you must be able to do so. However, Jefferson, on the other hand, he believes that, who is a strict interpretationist, that because there is nowhere in the Constitution that talks about a national bank, that would make it unconstitutional. Because it does not explicitly say the federal government can create a bank, must mean that they can't. Okay, and these are some of the things that are going to split them up. Think about Hamilton. He is more about big government led by the elite. Jefferson's more of a man of the people, more of a populist. Cares more about agrarian farming over industry. Okay, so two different viewpoints on how the government should operate. As far as Alexander Hamilton, he does believe that a strong government is necessary in order to provide strength in what the country needs, and he really tries to make America self-sufficient, and tries to kind of model it after England's system of industry, England's system of government. Okay, he's not pro-monarch, but he's not completely anti-monarchy either. Okay, he sees the strengths in a monarchy as well. However, Thomas Jefferson is the complete opposite and wrote an entire document in the Declaration of Independence breaking away from a king, does not want to create an American one. Therefore, he tries to focus more on state and local governments. He wants to try to protect the liberty of the people as much as possible in his eyes. He believes that farming is the best measure for an economy, because if everybody is farmers, if everybody's an agrarian farmer who farms for themselves and has their own land, there's no need to have a large government put in place, because you're already taking care of yourself. And he believes, again, in that strict interpretation where all other powers that are not in the Constitution are reserved for the states. And really their first biggest argument is going to come over Hamilton's financial plan. And remember, Hamilton is the Secretary of the Treasury. That is his job, to kind of advise President Washington on how the economy should be run. Jefferson, being Secretary of State, does not see it this way. He believes that we should be more of a traditional style economy. In Hamilton's plan, the very first thing says that the federal government should assume all state debts. What that means is, let's say that North Carolina is $5 million in debt from revolutionary payments. That money will be bought out by the federal government, and the federal government will assume that debt. Now, the reason for this would be that you would think that it would strengthen the U.S. dollar. It would allow for, because they're making payments and they're paying and they're showing credit, that when in need, the government can then borrow more money, and more other governments would be willing to give the Americans more money when they need it. On the other hand, if you are Thomas Jefferson, you don't want the states to do this, because it's a power that the federal government should not have. And plus, some states have already paid off their own debt. States like, Thomas Jefferson's own Virginia has already paid off their war debt. Massachusetts has not. New York has not. So in his mind, why should Virginia subsidize the other states' debt? So again, you already have conflicting ideas here on the proper role of the federal government in the economy. By taking the debts, though, Hamilton believed the states would work better together, and again try to increase interstate trade. And again, it would also help gain foreign credit in the world. Eventually, President Washington, who did not really affiliate with one particular party, but did tend to side more with the Federalists, is going to side with Alexander Hamilton and try to work towards that more industrial side economy, and will create a national bank, and also will work to take over state debts. Now the next part here, I really like this graph to kind of show what we're talking about. Remember, any country only can raise money through taxation and through tariffs, which is a form of taxation. They don't make anything themselves. So in order to raise money for this new nation who's bankrupt, we are in debt, Hamilton decides there should be a tax on whiskey, which is one of the biggest money makers in the country. So it's kind of like today where we have sin taxes in most states. The state governments will take a portion of any sales of tobacco or alcohol, which makes the price go up. So Hamilton wants to create a whiskey tax. He also wants to put in protective tariffs on foreign manufactured goods to help the American industry. Now, what that means, what a tariff is, and why this is important is because we are in a series of tariff wars right now with certain nations. And let's say we are in 1790. We were in 1790, and there are textile mills working in the United States, and they can create a $4 roll of cloth. Okay. And England also can make a $4 roll of cloth. So between the two, you're paying the same price. Americans are going to probably buy the one that's better, or that's more reliable, better cloth. And let's just say that for all intents and purposes, England makes a slightly better cloth. So most Americans are going to buy the Britain's cloth because it's the same price. What a tariff will do is increase the price of the good. It will put a tax on the imported good from England. So you have a cloth that costs $4 a roll. The government says we're going to charge that American company 25% to sell it in our country. That British cloth now will cost $5. Because if you're a British company, you're not going to just eat that cost. You're going to pass it on to the consumer. So now if you're living in America, you have a $4 roll of American cloth, or you have a $5 roll of British cloth. So the goal would be that hopefully more people will buy the American cloth and promote American industry. Now from this, Washington is going to approve Hamilton's whiskey tax, but will not approve the tariffs. So he gets some of what he wants, some what he doesn't want. Hamilton is also going to propose creating a Bank of the United States. This bank would be used to help regulate federal funds, creating loans for different states, also to try to regulate interstate trade between the two, really trying to put a hand in the economy. However, Thomas Jefferson and the Anti-Federalists believe that by creating the Bank of the United States, it puts way too much power in the hands of the elites from major cities who have control in the economy, stock markets, and so forth, that will really then be able to control land prices for farmers and really try to stick it to the middle class and the lower classes. They believe there's just too much power in the hands of the elite. And Hamilton's going to argue that it's a necessity in order to regulate the economy and regulate currency to kind of create less instability within the economy. President Washington will eventually come in and he will agree with the Federalists, and the Bank of the United States will be created in 1791 and will go all the way until President Andrew Jackson's term. And because of these staunch disagreements between Hamilton and Jefferson, we will have the first two-party system be created in the United States. And you can see this in the chart here. You have the Federalists, who are more Hamilton, John Adams, and then you have the Democratic Republicans, or the Republicans, Jeffersonian Republicans. They're all the same party, led by Jefferson, eventually James Madison, Patrick Henry, and so forth. And you have a larger government versus a smaller government. You have a ability to tax and create levies and create tariffs versus none of those things. Okay, again, more state power for the Republicans, more centralized power for the Federalists. They also mostly support a strong industrial economy. They like loose interpretation of the Constitution, and they want to support England when in times of war. However, the Democratic Republicans or the Jeffersonian Republicans are not that way. Remember, they support stronger state governments. They believe in a strict interpretation that it must say it in the Constitution to be able to do it. They don't want a national bank. They want smaller state banks to help support smaller farmers. And they tend to more support France. So now you start to have the first seedlings of division within the new country. Again, you have the Democrat Republicans and you have the Federalists. And after 4 years, Washington's presidency has been a pretty good success, and he's going to be once again unanimously elected president for a second term. And now he's got to solve some problems, though. There are some serious problems that are facing the country, both foreign and domestic. There's going to be another war that breaks out in Europe between Britain and France, the new French Republic. And much to be expected, the French want the Americans to help them against the British because they did the same for the Americans during the American Revolution. Jefferson is going to support the French. He's going to support their ability to get rid of a king.